Britain and France, two of Europe's most powerful and influential nations, have always had a complicated relationship. Throughout history, they were often adversaries, engaged in numerous wars and conflicts that shaped the political landscape of Europe. However, their last major war, which occurred during the Napoleonic era, would mark the end of their direct military confrontation. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor, was a formidable threat to Europe, and his defeat in 1815 at Waterloo ended France's expansionist ambitions. This defeat led to a dramatic shift in the relationship between Britain and France. After Napoleon's fall, a new geopolitical reality emerged in Europe. Both Britain and France recognized the growing threat of Russian expansion, which had the potential to upset the delicate balance of power in Europe. Russia's increasing influence, particularly in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, made both nations fear that their own interests might be undermined. In light of this, Britain and France began to cooperate, shifting from adversaries to uneasy partners. This cooperation took the form of mutual consultations on European crises, where both nations worked together to ensure that their interests were safeguarded against the expanding Russian Empire. One of the first significant moments of this new cooperation came during the Crimean War in the mid-19th century. The war was fought primarily between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. But Britain and France saw the Russian threat as an existential one to the stability of Europe. The two nations, alongside the Ottomans, fought to limit Russian power, particularly in the Black Sea region. This alliance marked a pivotal moment in their relationship, demonstrating that their rivalry could be set aside in the face of a common threat. The Crimean War was not the only conflict where Britain and France found common cause. During the Opium Wars in China, the two nations recognized shared interests in restricting other rising powers in Asia. As both sought to expand their colonial holdings in different parts of the world, they understood that it was in their best interest to work together to maintain their global influence. By the latter half of the 19th century, Britain and France had established a mutually beneficial relationship, one that was based on pragmatism rather than any deep-seated friendship. Britain, with its vast global empire, allowed France to take the lead on European matters, allowing Britain to focus on its interests overseas. In exchange, France refrained from challenging Britain's colonial dominance. Britain had the luxury of focusing on its far-flung empire, while France, despite its military prowess, had to rely on British support for security in Europe. This arrangement worked well for both nations for several decades, as their global priorities diverged, but their shared interests in restraining other powers kept them aligned. However, the stability of this relationship was not to last forever. Under the reign of Napoleon III, the nephew of the original Napoleon, tensions began to resurface. The Luxembourg crisis, for example, was a flashpoint that reignited old animosities between the two nations. Napoleon III sought to expand France's influence in Europe, which caused discomfort in Britain, particularly when it came to territorial ambitions in Luxembourg. Additionally, Britain and France's overlapping colonial ambitions in Africa led to further tensions, as both nations sought to extend their empires across the continent. Yet, despite these rising tensions, the two nations found it necessary to cooperate. As France, facing increasing military pressure from Germany, needed British goodwill, the turn of the 20th century brought about even more significant changes. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany adopted an aggressive foreign policy, one that posed a direct challenge to both Britain and France. Wilhelm's aggressive military buildup, especially his massive expansion of the German Navy, alarmed Britain, which had long prided itself on its naval supremacy. This forced Britain to reassess its foreign policy priorities. In response to the growing German threat, Britain turned to France, realizing that a closer relationship between the two nations was necessary to balance the power of Germany. This led to the formation of the Entente Cordiale in 1904, a political and military agreement between Britain and France. While not a formal alliance, the Entente marked the end of centuries of rivalry and set the stage for cooperation in the years leading up to World War I. Britain and France, found common ground in their mutual distrust of Germany and a shared desire to maintain their empires. By the time World War I erupted in 1914, the two nations were firmly aligned against the Central Powers, with Germany at the forefront of their concerns. After the horrors of World War I, the reasons for their alliance became even clearer. Both nations had lost significant amounts of manpower and resources during the war, and neither wanted to see a resurgent Germany capable of threatening their own interests once again. The shared fear of communism also played a significant role in their post-war relationship, as both Britain and France were deeply concerned by the rise of socialist movements, particularly the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. They sought to maintain their global influence and preserve their empires, which were increasingly being challenged by new powers such as the United States and the Soviet Union. The primary reason that Britain and France became such close allies during this period was a shared fear of losing their global power status. Both nations were terrified of being overtaken by the rising powers of Russia, Germany, and the Soviet Union. Furthermore, the United States, which had emerged from World War I as an economic and military powerhouse, posed a new challenge to their dominance. Britain and France were united by the need to preserve their empires and their influence on the world stage. This shared goal was a driving force behind their partnership, which would continue to shape European politics for much of the 20th century. In conclusion, the relationship between Britain and France evolved from one of bitter rivalry to one of strategic partnership, based not on friendship but on mutual necessity. Their alliance was forged out of a shared desire to maintain their global power and protect their interests against common threats, particularly the rise of Germany and the expansion of Russian influence. While tensions and disagreements would continue to arise throughout the years, the fear of losing their place in the world kept Britain and France closely aligned throughout much of the 20th century.